I'm going to open the public hearing at 4:39 p.m. on January 6th. Thank you all for being here. Again, if you haven't signed in on the attendance sheet, it's all one sign-in sheet from the select board meeting and the public hearing, so make sure you hit that on the way back out. And there's no agenda for this, but we have two specific permits that we're going to talk about, or ordinances, I should say. And the first one is the special events permit. For a little history, and Bob and Frank, hop in or tap me if you want to interject. I was talking to a few other towns, and they all have special event permits. And I said, we don't have a special event permit. Why don't we have one? We should really have one. It puts into place parameters for special events, large events that may require special details or ambulance or fire and things like that. So I started looking into it. Julie pulled together a lot of detail from some other towns of events permits that they have. And so we put this together, and I didn't do as much of the legwork beyond that, coming up with a scheme here, as Mike Mosier did, and Julie did, and Bill Terry did from the planning board. And after we put this out, I have gotten so much feedback, and it is so appreciated, because this is what public hearings are for, to find out what everyone thinks about these ordinances. So I'm going to really throw a curveball to Bob and Frank real quickly before I open this up to the public and say, why do we need this? I'm really giving it a second thought to why we really need a special events permit. We don't have any large events in town that are not usually already covered, like weddings, golf tournaments, events like the duck race. We've had a few fireworks shows, but generally, concerts and things like that, but generally, the other events that we have are private events, like the Whitney Center. Every week practically has an unbelievable program scheduled. They have potluck dinners, they have all kinds of things. So I got lots of feedback from the Whitney Center committee saying, what is this going to do to our administration, and what do we have to do for this, and does it affect me, and also does it affect my birthday party that I'm going to have on my private property when I want to have a tent, and all kinds of different questions. So now I'm thinking, do we have a problem in town that requires us to have a special events permit, or is there a reason why we need to put this in place that is not already covered by our noise ordinances, our fireworks permits, etc.? So I'm going to ask Bob and Frank to weigh in on
Doesn't surprise me, I'll tell you right now. I thought it was a little bit much. And it reminds me way back, some people might remember Ross Heald. He was a selectman in town. He was an insurance man, but he said, there's no such thing as a risk-free society. And we really were hitting everything. We got to be careful for this. We got to watch out for this. We got to watch out for the parking. We have to watch out for fires. All of this stuff, And I just thought it was a little bit much. Now, obviously, we have to know about when there's an event. All right. So tell us about it. I also thought at the beginning we had 60 days. Time. I'd rather say, if your application has to be submitted within 60 days, why don't we just say a timely manner if we're going to have anything? That's just crazy. Someone come in here, I don't see why we can't do it in a couple of weeks and get things done. This town has been doing events for, 70 years, 80 years, a long time. We know how to do it. I don't think we need to be encumbered with a lot of rules and regulations that we've already basically taken care of. All right? And I saw another thing. It said, we want to prohibit corporate logos. Well, what happens if Rosendael comes in here as a good sponsor of a ski area? We're not going to allow a corporate logo somewhere after they've been, after they were able to go through the permit process. Another thing, aesthetic standards for a sign. Who would like to be the aesthetic standards cop here? Because we can appoint you for this. All right? So there's just a few things. So I was so happy because Barbara told me that she was thinking about this hard, and maybe I think I'm going to throw this out there. And you saw the way I smiled when you said it, because I've been thinking the same thing. But that's me. All right. So anyway, that's my take.
Bob?
So I think that the special events permit conversations we've been having are more about the growth of the use of the town than the population increase. And I think that the tone of the things we talked about were more along the lines of a big monstrous event could come into town and be somewhere, and we would have no say or control over what happened or how it was set up. And that can impact the character of neighborhoods, depending on where those events are. And I think that nobody would want to see a 500-person event happening in a field right out in back of their house without any control or say over how it was set up. So I don't know about numbers and 50 people. That seems a little light to me for sure. And some of this stuff deserves a good solid look at because we want it to fit into our town today. And so if we're really feeling like some of these numbers are too low, or some of these logos are unrealistic and not a problem, I think things that impact the character of the community are things that deserve discussion. And that's why we've been having this discussion. And that's why I'm in favor of continuing with the discussion. It came out at the last meeting, and I don't know that a good, solid, thorough going through right now with as much input in the room as we can get is a bad thing at all. I love conversation, and there's plenty here, and I can see homeowners represented, I can see business owners represented. It seems to be a relatively diverse group in here. And I just think there are thresholds that no one would want to see in a special event that was in their neighborhood. And right now, we're just trying to keep up with the growth of our community as a magnet, and we pulled from what we felt, or I would say Julie, the planning board, Barbara, have all been, and Sergeant Mosier, Lieutenant Mosier, have been, that happened quick, by the way. Looking at neighboring towns to see what they do. As an example, I think for a while, we seemed like a fireworks magnet town because so many towns around us had policies prohibiting fireworks. And it got to the point where people were tired of seeing fireworks at all, and now and so that's the look we have, is that we do not approve fireworks in the town. And I wouldn't want to see us be a special events permit magnet that was attracting permits that were out of the character of our town. So I think it's easy to imagine taking this blueprint and having it represent our values and having us feel like we are supporting things like this when they come into town and still protecting the character of the town. And just as importantly, protecting businesses that want to have special events. I would love to see, maybe it's a first read, maybe we're forming a committee of diverse representatives of the town to include residents that are concerned and business owners that would like to help craft a policy. I think there's room for a policy like this in our town. Some sort of a policy, not necessarily this one is written, but something.
One of the things that I heard for feedback and got a quote on was that in Conway, their special event is defined as an event that is held on public property or non-residential private property that can reasonably be expected to cause a public gathering that is not part of the normal course of business at that location. So that says anything that's sort of an out of the ordinary type thing. Well, so like Wentworth is a wedding venue, but they also have a golf course, so they have that. Eagle is a wedding venue, but they also have the cross-country skiing on the golf course and some NCAA events and things. So those, to me, would, like, that would be, the skiing would be out of the course, natural course of Eagle's business, but not the Jackson Ski Touring. So, you know, a definition is hard to come by on that, but that, like you said, I think the wording needs to encompass that. And one of the things I said in the previous meetings too is, the last thing we want to do is prohibit businesses from doing something that becomes too administratively cumbersome. Or, you know, oh, for every wedding I have to do an event permit. That's not what we're looking to do. I think that was, you know, this is special event, not in the regular course of business event. So that was some of the feedback that I originally got. And again, I mentioned like the Whitney Center. This is not something that the Whitney Center would have to do because in their normal course of business, they hold events there. So that just gives a little context. Anything else before I open to the public?
No, I'm interested in feedback.
Yeah, the
Yep.
feedback is really what I want
Yep.
to hear, because we haven't heard, well, I haven't heard too much from anybody about
Yep.
this subject. So
So,
this will be good. We've
all
got
right.
some good people here.
So, in the back, Mark.
Mark will let Thorn Hill Christmas.
You know what, I'm gonna swing the camera around because this
Yeah,
is a
sure.
public hearing and I wanna make sure everything is heard, so, do you mind? Okay, go ahead, Mark.
So I'll try to address a few points. First of all, we talk about booking windows in hotels and restaurants and catering. So booking windows used to be 6 months to a year out. Those have shrunk to about 30 days, sometimes inside of 2 weeks, sometimes inside of 3 days. So I don't know what volume of business I have, sometimes 2 weeks before that day. So to submit an application 60 days in advance is impossible at times. So I could have a wedding cancel for next Saturday. I need to do something. I need to do something or I can't pay the staff. Or nobody booked the rooms. So I need to plan something so the rooms get sold. So right now I have no weddings booked in July. Not one. So I have to do something on my weekends in July. Now, that may change, or one may cancel. So the time frame of submitting an application is a little challenging. Number two is the size of the event. If I do a jazz trio on the porch at Thorn Hill, 10 people may show up. 100 people may show up. I have no idea. So if 30 people show up, I'm in compliance. If 51 people show up, I'm not. So I just don't understand what I have to get approved and what I don't have to get approved. So I'm just a little unclear.
Good feedback, and I'm just gonna take the feedback
Thank you.
and take some notes. Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much.
Thank you.
Jay, and then Aaron.
So a couple things that we've had trouble with is people show up, the fireworks, for example, I think the limit from the state on the permit is 15 days prior. It has to be on the fire marshal's desk. We've had times when all of a sudden, 2 weeks before an event, all of a sudden we're getting notified of they want to do a fireworks show. Well, in a volunteer, with 28 volunteer members, it's not always that easy in 2 weeks to find enough volunteers. I could be on vacation, or Pete could be on vacation, the officers could be doing stuff. That time frame doesn't always work. I've gotten phone calls on a Friday night of people wanting to get into the Gray's Inn to access staging and stuff like that when trucks have it blocked. It's like, you couldn't have told me a week ago, 2 weeks ago? I don't always know of all the events in town. I know the highway department might not know if there's a ski race going on, where they gotta put snow on the road or something. So that's just, there needs to be a little bit of some better timeframes for whether it's just a written policy or something. Like, I'm not necessarily for having an event permit, but there is some time frame stuff that causes some big issues for us.
Eric?
Okay, a couple things. First, mechanically, at the last meeting, there was some discussion with Julie around getting the written version of this document out within the statutory requirements of 7 days. Obviously, we beat that. The comments that I had made at that period of time is that those of us that have businesses and own businesses in town, this was a very busy 2-week period for us. So we have not had the opportunity to accurately review it and look at it. And the way it was presented to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that this was going to go towards a town vote of the policy, and it was discussed as more of a warrant type situation, something that would be recommended by the select board. However, in the agenda today in number 10, it says that the special events permit ordinance does not require a town vote, and the select board can adopt a special events permit ordinance process pursuant to RSA 286. So is that the intention, and has that changed in terms of how the select board would plan to do something or enact something like this?
I'm taking public comments at this time, so that's exactly what the agenda says, that we would vote on it as a select board. Our public hearing tonight is to hear from, like Bob said, the businesses, the property owners, everyone that's involved, to get that feedback. So for us to say, this is it, folks, hope you like it, that's not gonna happen.
Gotcha. So
Okay.
for clarity, you wouldn't take it to a town vote, you would adopt it as this 3-person select board?
Correct.
Okay. That was not as clear to me. And then I think when we go to the policy itself, just a couple notes to note. I think it lacks authority in the first version a couple ways. It certainly lacks clarity, and I think we've heard that in terms of what would qualify as a special event. The rational basis for excluding Jackson Grammar School and community events is extremely unclear and concerning, and pre-existing use as well. And I think as written right now, it's a pretty far-reaching and frankly alarming document that really needs a whole lot more work. I'm not opposed or against a special event permit process. I just would like to see it much more robust. And then I think fundamentally what the town has to understand is what is the problem we're trying to solve. And you spoke to that briefly at the opening of this thing. Jackson is a resort town. It is a resort destination. There are as many hotel rooms here as there are permanent residences. And when you add in the VRBOs and the long short-term rental properties and the second homes, Jackson is a resort town. It has been for a very long time. Certainly the rebirth of Black Mountain has supercharged that, but a resort town has resort-like events and features and qualities, and I think we need to keep that in mind in the policies and procedures that we build. So in summary, I would feel a whole lot more comfortable having the town look at this instead of a 3-person select board. I would feel a whole lot more comfortable if it was flushed out in a timely manner, and I would feel a whole lot more comfortable supporting something like this if it truly seeks to support and solve the problem of managing income limits. So that's what I have for now.
I'm glad you're here for that last part, because that's what we're doing tonight, so thank you. Anybody else? Hi, Ken.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be echoing a little bit of what's been said already, but I'm here just to speak for the Jackson Ski Touring. I'm the Vice President of the Board of Directors. And since you're looking for sort of the concerns we've had here relative to future changes you may make, number one is in the definition of special events, it becomes very confusing as to what it actually means. And if you read the first sentence, you get down to the or part of the last part of it, which means if you hit any of these criteria, you are a special event. And then it has the last sentence, which then goes through and says, this includes but is not limited to festivals, parades, races, fairs, outdoor concerts, and rallies. That may be a normal course of business for many, whether it's a nonprofit like the Jackson Ski Touring Foundation, or as you've already heard, the 2 businesses here in town. And then it gets further complicated because when you get around to the exceptions, you see that it says seasonal weddings. So why are seasonal weddings? And that would indicate that since seasonal weddings, which are a normal part of a hotel business, are given an exception, that would mean that the last sentence in the definition of special events includes everything, whether it's a race, a festival, even if that's a normal course that an organization constantly does. The second part, and I think it's been discussed here as well, is both trying to describe how, where, and when. But any organization that's running an event outside is really governed by the weather. It is a serious problem. A number of years back, Jackson Ski Touring Foundation hosted the Junior Olympics here, which actually resulted in seeing people like Keegan Randall, who became one of the first Nordic skiers to actually win a gold medal in the Olympics. At the last minute, the day before, because of the melting snow, we had to move that course up into what was formerly the Davis's field. There was no way that we could make that decision. We had races here from Sweden and so forth. There's no way we could have all of a sudden gone through the bureaucracy that's listed here. We'd have had to tell people, go home, sorry. Go back to Sweden, thank you.
We're not talking about Sweden Day.
No, I know. I wish we were at that point. And the same thing, we will be hosting the Bill Koch Festival that's coming up. There'll be hundreds of kids coming here from New York and all the way across New England. It's the kind of event that you want to see. When we host an event, if it requires a road crossing or something, I think we've always had the courtesy, because we have to go to both New Hampshire DOT if it's crossing those roads, and we do go to our police department. So those are things I think that are already happening, so it's a little hard to understand when we've had a good history of doing this, that we'd have to go through 60 days. There are many events that we also host that there's no way we can tell you 60 days in advance. In fact, this, as written, says just the Jackson Grammar School. So if the Jackson Bartlett Junior High asks to host a race here because they can't host it someplace else, we might have 24 to 48 hours to try to help them be able to host that event. The same is true with Kennett. If they can't race at Whitaker Woods, where do they come? They ask us if we're willing to let them use the course up here, which is part of what we do as a community. We would have to tell them, you've got to go 60 days in advance, go to the police department, go to the fire department, tell them what the race course is, etc. And we couldn't even tell you what the race course is until we figured it out, because we'd have melting snow. It's just we have the best conditions up here. So this, as written here, is highly bureaucratic and problematic, I think, is expressed by others as well. There's no way we could function under these rules.
Thank you. It's, like I said, that's what public hearings are for. You know, you put something together and you say, we really should have one because everybody has one. And then you go, well, what problems are we resolving? So thanks for all of this input so far. Mike, Lieutenant? Sorry, Chief.
Yeah, so as far as to the notice time frame, you know, does it need to be 60? Not necessarily. But, I mean, to Jay's point, he's got 28 members to choose from. We have 3 to try to coordinate whether detail is needed, if even possible to coordinate that, if we're even capable of it, if we have to reach out to the outside sources for details. And if somebody's on training, somebody's on vacation, that might leave one of us working and covering shifts. So that leaves us pretty thin with a last minute notice. So something for a notice if we are going to do something for a permit. Does it need necessarily be 60? Maybe not, but more than 2 weeks notice.
Chief?
Yes, I would like, from a public safety perspective, I'd like the board to consider as an adjunct to the zoning special events permit, because I understand this would fall under zoning and is the purview of the board, but sort of as an adjunct to that, I've always have been and remain concerned about the use of public spaces in the town, and I'm concerned from a public safety perspective and also from an enforcement perspective. Particularly, I'll get examples. I call it the town commons, but it's really the ball field. But I call it the town commons by the pond, and also Jackson Falls, and to some lesser extent Prospect Farm. That is a public space. But my concern always has been, and I kind of reflect back on COVID. The falls were used and truly abused, and to some degree because we didn't have a level of kind of not oversight, because the Conservation Commission is the oversight, but a kind of a matrix of rules that could also be enforced, not just rules that exist as a suggestion, but rules that could be enforced should we encounter them in our daily rounds. So I would, and I recognize this is a work in progress, obviously, that's why we're having a public hearing, is if as an adjunct to the special events permit, you could consider the regulation of the public spaces so that, and such that when we encounter a violation, that rule, that permitting or that zoning regulation has an enforcement mechanism that we could take action independent of, say, filing a zoning violation. For instance, at the falls, we had people with open charcoal grills, drinking alcohol out of glass bottles, tying hammocks up to trees, and amplified music, which really, you know, when people envision the falls, I've never seen a picture of the falls painted with those kind of shenanigans. So, but if those kind of regulations were built in as an adjunct and then provided an enforcement mechanism, it wouldn't just be a, we saw you do that and we tell the zoning board, then we could take some level of either, you know, warning to stop, you know, and then if they don't, you can trespass them. If they don't, you can hook them for trespass or write a ticket for whatever function, you know, thing they're doing. But the green space, you know, I envision people using the green space, you know, until we really had the camping ordinance, somebody could have plopped a teepee down there and camped all summer. You know, they got running water in the river and who knows, you know, what else goes on. So those regulations would help us maintain the character of the community that I think these efforts are really trying to maintain. So it doesn't get, you know, it doesn't slip out of your grasp, never to be returned. So just a thought, as you know, as this process goes on.
Yes?
Hi everyone, Chris Meyer. I'm here on behalf of Black Mountain. I'm an attorney for Black Mountain. And I will tell you, I've looked at a lot of these ordinances. From your agenda, it appears that this one is written under RSA 286. I agree with the chief that these are appropriate for public spaces. And I think you can have a robust policy about public spaces and streets. However, if you look at that statute, it's very limited to what towns can license. So my concern, both from representing private businesses and also municipalities, is where these ordinances creep into public or private property, either residential private property or commercial private property. The only hook in 286 to get onto private property is the regulation of open air public meetings. So to the extent that that is the only thing you can regulate on private property, that's pretty limited. And the way the ordinance is written currently, or the proposed ordinance is written currently, goes way beyond what's allowed under 286. So I think you really should look at what the statute says you can permit and what the ordinance tries to permit here. I think from both sides, the town side and the private business side, the most important thing as to what the ordinance regulates is clarity on both sides, so that both sides, the private landowner and the town, can look in advance and say, this is covered or this isn't covered. The ordinance doesn't, as written, doesn't really do that. It talks about what's in the normal course of business. So if Black Mountain had a wedding 5 years ago on its property, is that in the normal course of business? From the landowner side, I would probably say yes. If it only has one wedding a year, is that in the normal course of business? Probably yes. If a hotel or a community event holds an event every other month, is that in the normal course of business? Probably yes, but there's no differentiation between 50 people and 5,000 people. So the ski touring, we've had the NCAA here. Does that mean they can host it every year without complying with this ordinance? I don't know. So I think really it's providing clarity as to what the definitions are in the ordinance and giving the businesses clarity as to what's included and what's not. The third thing is you include indoor events. I would suggest that this should not include indoor events. Indoor events are not covered by RSA 286, which really only applies on private property to open air public meetings. And the last thing that Eric touched on a little bit is there's really no rational basis in the ordinance itself or that I've heard to treat some entities, whether it be the Whitney Center or the Jackson School or other nonprofits differently from private businesses. Private businesses may have an increased need to conduct events. As Mark talked about before, he needs to fill in time where he doesn't have weddings and have events there where the Whitney Center might not have that economic pressure to have that same event. So I'd like to see all the different entities in town treated the same, unless there really is a rational basis for treating for-profit businesses different than nonprofit businesses or other type of businesses. And with that, we'd certainly be willing to work with you to make this an appropriate and policy that is clear and works for both businesses and the town. Thank you.
Lieutenant?
Touch base for you, Bob, as well. You mentioned the 50 people and the 100 people, and Jay would know more about this than I do, but I believe the state actually considers 50 an assembly and 100 as a large scale event. Is that?
Yeah, anything over 50 is an assembly space, anything over 100 is a permitted.
So that's where those kind of numbers come from. Just
And keep in mind, anything over 250, you required by code law, what we deal with for a crowd manager, which that's just a simple online training for an employee to do crowd manager training. So that's another key number that we don't talk about a lot, but it comes up once in a while.
Can I just comment on that?
Sure, Mark.
So the Christmas farm in full capacity for number of guests is 140. So if I said I'll come to the pool and have an afternoon pool party, I'm over 100. So it's like so quick to get over 100. That's just guests staying at the inn. I didn't even invite anyone from outside.
The outside space.
Mike?
Yes, Mike Mallett, Red Fox. So I came here really just to get some clarity on the definition, which everybody spoke quite clearly about the same reasons why I came. But after listening to Jay and both Mike and Chris, I can also understand the need for advance notice on an event that would require fire presence, police presence. But for all the events that many of us are talking about wouldn't require a fire department presence. So would that be the defining line that you would use in an ordinance like this? You know, where you say if it requires a police presence, then you obviously would need planning, you need notice, but then we wouldn't get in the weeds over talking about the 50-person birthday party or the pool party that might expand to 100. If we don't need fire presence or police, let that be the delineating line. If that makes sense.
Who else?
Penny Borath. I'm kind of going along the same lines as Mike and just wondering if really would help to relook at the goals of the permit and say it's really to alert the police that, hey, there might be the whole Whitney Center emptying out and with 300 people walking across the road. You know, so it really feels like it's alerting Jay that there might be a road crossing, that we might need a police presence, and making the owners, the business or the private homeowners aware of, make sure they sign off on that maybe there is a noise ordinance and they recognize that. And really just simplify the whole process and just making sure everybody's aware of what's going on and is the purpose of a permit or application or whatever. And as my dad always said, keep it simple. And so that the police, the town, the select board, even and the fire department and ambulance cannot be reactionary, but work on their schedules to when they need to be here and adjust as necessary to support whatever is going along. And by having people sign off on the ordinance, noise ordinance, or whatever other limitations, alcohol, noise, or whatever, they're acknowledging that they need to abide by those regulations that are already in place.
Yes.
Cyrus Demick. So you mentioned about the wild duck race, the wildcat race.
Yeah.
What are we doing now for something like that type of event?
So I've been thinking about this a lot as people are speaking. Most of the large events that we have, especially chamber related, the road races and things, we get advance notice. So we've already got the sort of check boxes of the permits. We need to make sure the road closures, that people are aware of it, any sign postings and things like that. So those are the things that are done well because of the communication. And I think the goal of this is not to be restrictive or to put hardship on anyone. It is with the communication, just like everyone has said. Do the police need to be aware? Does the fire department need to be over aware? And did we pay the bill? And then the ambulance, so things like that. Do we have road closures? Is there additional signage? What is the weather contingency, which we're not going to manage that ever. But that's the thing, I think, is the communication is what has made things successful in the past, is that we know these things up front. So without the teeth to say, oh, how did that event get here without anybody knowing and we have an emergency? I guess we're trying to be proactive on that side by saying, let's have a permit process so whoever could possibly be involved would be aware.
Yeah.
Does that answer your?
Yeah, that answers my question. I think a couple things is, one thing is that we need to, as a town, we need to vote on it. I don't think it should be 3 people voting on it. I think this should definitely come to a vote at town meeting or during the election process, because there's a lot of input right here in this room. There's a lot of input. Also, I think we're going to go down a very slippery slope with this, and it's going to really it's going to hurt a lot of people and a lot of businesses and a lot of the industry that we have in Jackson. I've been here 25 years. There's things I hate. I hate getting stuck behind a horse and carriage, that drives me crazy. Or having to have 100 skiers go across my road on Green Hill before I can drive up to my house. But at the end of the day, I love Jackson and I love living in this town and being on the fire department and serving the town. But I think that we're going to go down a really slippery slope with this. I think we need to, like Penny said, we need to keep it very simple, very, very simple. Not a lot of 11 pages of ordinances and lawyer talk that nobody understands. At the end of the day, hey, I want to have a wedding at my house. My daughter's getting married. Well, I'm going to have 50 people, or they all brought friends, and now there's 200 people at my house. And as long as I'm not disturbing the peace per se, I don't want to be like, oh, I've just broken the ordinance.
I think about our short-term rental ordinance too, where folks have to sign an affidavit that says they know about the noise ordinance, they know about the parking ordinances, they know that they have to have proper egress and things like that. So, knowing that the folks that are holding events out of the ordinary, like certainly the folks that own all the venues in town, are aware of what the ordinances are. We hold everyone else responsible and saying that ignorance is not an excuse. So making sure that when these events do happen, that folks know that this is the way Jackson operates. Please be respectful of that. So someone had their hand up back. Yes?
I'd like to and I'm going to have to run out of here, so I don't
you
mean
tell
to
me your name first.
I'm Lisa Dan Moser. I'm on Green Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And I would really like to hear more about the noise ordinances and the violations, because the language is very questionable in how it is worded. Using things like excessively, unnecessary, loud, prolonged. You're not giving any definition as to how this will be read or how this will be determined. And I think that that's very important. My former husband and I were rescued for Siberians. This was like 30-something years ago. An adjacent neighbor complained who had moved into the neighborhood. They didn't know what the amount, the decibel, the hours that they could actually bark. They rarely barked. They only did it when sirens went off. By the time we got done, and we spoke with an attorney in Portland who also had Siberians and ran a sled team, the dogs could have barked nonstop for 3.5 days, and no one could have done anything in terms of the language. So I think it's really important that we be clear on what we're saying. And I've found some of this a little hilarious in the sense that we're talking about people singing in the village. I didn't know people were singing in the village and being loud, but does that mean if someone were going to have a caroler, do they need a special permit? Is it all right if they're not walking in the village, but they're on someone's porch or in a driveway? There needs to be some clear definition to this. And, you know, I'm addressing a little bit of my feelings about the community and being very divided. The globe is already divided. We're all divided without adding more. And I find it a little bit offensive that some people in some parts of the community are upset about noises. They're upset about grooming. They're upset about snowmaking. They're, you know, no one speaks to the fact, I live on Green Hill. I'm at the same height of land as the Shenandoah. I love the Shenandoah, but it was Irish whaling 7 nights a week for over 30-something years. I love it, but 7 nights a week. No one discusses the Wentworth. When the Thompson House Eatery would have events. When the Wildcat is doing something in their back patio. There's no discussion of how we feel. I've heard we are family more than enough times and celebrate good times, but I find it offensive that people want to pick apart what's happening in some parts of Jackson while not addressing what's happening in others. Being a good neighbor means I'm invested in my neighbors and those businesses being successful. What would have happened if Fritz Koppel hadn't bought the Wentworth? You know, I think that we really need to discuss the noise all the way around, not just pertaining to something specific, I'm sorry, such as Black Mountain. You know, there are lots of different instances, and I think it's important that we really look at this and really think about the language that we're using and set strict criteria. But please, don't divide us any more than we already are. There's enough division. And neighbors reporting on other neighbors, that's really frightening to me, you know.
So Lisa, are you talking specifically about the noise ordinance now, or are you talking
Yes,
about? Okay.
I'm talking about the noise ordinance, just
Okay.
in relation to, you know, businesses
Okay.
and people within the community.
I'm just going to ask, before we go to that then, are there any other comments that haven't been made about the special event permitting language, et cetera? Because I've taken a lot of notes. We have our video to watch. I think we've got some really common thoughts and grounds, and what I would like to see, if this makes sense to the two of you, is to come up with some feedback and a new version of the special event application or permitting. Pare it down, get some feedback from you folks again, and this is going to be a time factor. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think that this is a really great start to find out what the town needs and make it right, get it right, I should say. Stephen?
Your likelihood of getting it right the first time is pretty slim.
Yeah.
You've been involved in writing several ordinances with the town. You do your best, you throw everything at it, and it may take a few years to get it right. But keep working on it
Good.
and go from there.
Chris?
If I were to make one final suggestion as to how to go forward first, to try to get it right first, do public land first. Don't get into private properties first. See how it works with public land first, and then see, okay, how could we extend this off under 286 under the open air meeting policy? Then you get a test run for your own property. That's streets and public property.
And Ellen, did you have something? And then Deb?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm Ellen Chandler from Jackson Ski Touring, and I mean, we wake up every day ready to handle hundreds of people, and sometimes they come in one at a time, sometimes they come in groups of 40 or 50 or more, and sometimes we know in advance, sometimes we know weeks in advance, sometimes, you know, 3 ski clubs get together and show up. We would need a permit for almost every day of the year, and I think that it scares me to think that this could go on a public ballot with numbers that a lot of people would think seem really large, but you know, we hope to see at least 500 people a day, and we don't always get there, but that seems like a large number, but it's really not when it comes to an operation of our size.
And I think the definition, like we said, of what is the normal course of business and who falls into that category and at what point is hugely important, because being ski touring, normal course of business, ski touring. Deb, did you have anything on top of that?
Yeah, my name is Deb Deal, and I just want to speak also in support not only of Jackson Ski Touring and cohorts with that group. Thank you guys on that, and I support what you have said. But I'd also just like to make mention of asking ourselves really what it is that we're trying to achieve with the ordinance. I have a lot of respect for those of you that have put the time in to try to start to craft some language that, you know, we can have a starting point. So for that, I thank you. But asking ourselves really what is it that we're trying to achieve? And then the other question that I ask is, are we really enforcing the ordinances that we currently have? Jay made one quick reference to, you know, well, we have this in place, but we never really actually, you know, apply a fee or enforce it. And so it has me asking right away is, you know, are the things that we're really looking to address already in place in ordinances that we're just simply not enforcing? I think that kind of is at the forefront of what I'm thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric?
Just a final thing, again, on the town adoption piece, select board vote versus a town vote. As written, I think both the statute, the authority that you guys have cited under 286 to adopt this unilaterally does not support the ordinance as written. And so I would highly encourage the town to avoid that conflict and have this be properly adopted by a vote across the town, not a unilateral decision from 3 people on the board.
Anything new to add? Huntley?
You know, I just want to bring it up as far as the noise ordinance.
No,
Years-
that's next.
Oh, okay, next,
Okay.
okay.
Ordinance next. Hold your thought, I'm calling you first. Anything else that you two want to add on top of this? Like I said, what I think we'll do with this then is take it to a rewrite, we'll pare it down, we'll answer some questions, and we'll resubmit and say, how much did we clarify, how much did we get right? What are we trying to achieve, like Devaney said. So I took a lot of good notes. Hopefully we'll look at things and come out with draft number 2. So thanks everyone for your input. Noise ordinance. Huntley, hold on a sec. Do you have any comments first with the board that you want to make on the changes from the noise ordinance at this point?
No, I think it's relatively familiar. Let's hear what
All right,
what the
Huntley.
public has to say.
Positive.
Okay.
I was just saying, because I live on Black Mountain Road, and years ago, before we had a noise ordinance, I could hear sometimes at Wentworth, the Eagle, Christmas Farm Inn, and Whitney's. But, you know, since we put that noise ordinance in where they have weddings, it's only when the weather's certain that I can barely hear it at all. So as far as the hotels and their weddings, I think that the noise ordinance has done an amazing job, and the hotels have stuck by, you know, what they've agreed to.
Comments also on the noise ordinance? One thing we did consider, and really we don't have much to change on this. I mean, it's something that we wanted to revisit just because it's part of an ordinance that we have. We looked at the hours of 10:30 up to 10:30, and we're wondering if it makes sense to say from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. instead. So we're backing it up 30 minutes and making it until 6 a.m. I don't know if anyone has any input on that. Eric?
Yeah, Barb, we, as you know, in our settlement agreement with the town, we did move our time to 10 o'clock, so I think that is appropriate and makes sense across everything. I would just like to say publicly too that we feel that our settlement agreement and our pre-existing use would supersede any adopted ordinance. And so I think that's important, again, as we look to understand the problem we're trying to solve. We worked very hard to get that settlement agreement across the line, and we think that that would certainly supersede any additional restrictions that would be put in place on Black Mountain.
Yes.
And I'll just say that the times, some of this are extended liquor license permits that Huntley's really referring to that address some of the or sound pollution that people were experiencing in town. Was kind of crafted initially to deal with one hotel in town that was up high enough to where sound would echo around the valley. And so we worked with them to craft an agreement that tent walls would be down when music was playing, and we used decibel sound that could be measured. Although it's relatively self-policing when the walls of the tent are down, you can't blow people's eardrums out that are in the tent. And so that ended up working really well. And that's, I think, what Huntley's referring to most often. We worked with the inn that I won't name, but and felt like a 10 p.m. time for music to end was reasonable. And they made the case for why 10:30 was much more reasonable for them. And that's why we compromised with them at 10:30. So some of these times come from our extended liquor license permits. And an extended liquor license permit is something like when they're talking about seasonal weddings, our extended license liquor permits can go to an inn or a hotel for a period of time from April 15th to October 20th. And so it's not even, nobody's looking for a liquor license extension for their business for just like one day, that 20 times. I mean, these inns and hotels are having weddings every single weekend. And so that's why we wanted to craft something that could hold up over time and still be attractive for the business to bring in what they want and to preserve as much as we could the character of the surrounding town. And, you know, even the special event permits, I mean, it's like, we'd like to know where these cars are going to park. Have you got a plan in place? I mean, there's some weird, there was a lot of feedback on definitions, but the special events permit itself was like 2 pages and a drawing. So, you know, we just want to know what your plan is. And for the regulation ordinance for the noise, we just want a way to be able to get on record that, look, you know, if your wedding is playing an encore at 11:30 at night, that's intrusive. And if your tent walls are up so that the sound is reverberating around the valley, that's really going to be bothersome. And we're trying to protect the character of lots of things at the same time we protect the rights of our businesses in town to go out and do all of the things that a resort community needs to do to be viable.
So any thoughts on time then? Is it worth it to change it from 10:30 to 10 o'clock if oh, sorry, Mark?
Sorry, can I just say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
95% of the time, 10 p.m. works fine for us.
Yeah.
But if Brian could walk up to me at a $100,000 wedding, but they want to go to 11, can I apply for an exception?
No.
Because I'm gonna just pay a $100 fine.
you can pay. No,
I know, but then I'm breaking the rules. I'm just a jerk. You know, I don't
No,
want to
I'm
be a jerk.
kidding. I understand that, and that's why I'm wondering, is like 10:30, 10:30, is that because you did some homework before, is that still a viable time to leave it at that, and we just?
It seemed to work for the business,
Yeah.
and that's why we did that. Certainly, what you're talking about in the way of amplified music is typically going to come from a band playing live music or a DJ or something like that, and these times are written into the contract. The bride and groom know it, the people paying the bills know it, the bands know it when they set up, they know what the 90 decibels is, they understand what tent walls are. So that's why we haven't heard of any businesses really having a problem with these things, as long as their contracts are clear and understood before the event begins. That, I think, is more the key than anything.
Yeah. Cyrus?
So if 10:30 is working, which it
Yeah.
sounds like you just said 10:30 is working,
No, it's
it's not working?
Okay, hold on. I don't wanna have to
Okay,
finish out the
okay.
discussion. Okay, go
Some
ahead.
people in the room have said that 10:30 is working. Yes, I go to bed before 10:30. I don't want to listen to it. But at the end of the day, we have to find a happy medium, right? We want to make the businesses happy. We want to make the people living in town happy.
Chief, did you have something?
Yes.
And then,
I will agree to some degree with Lisa on the question that she raised on subjectivity versus objectivity. When we're trying to enforce an ordinance through the subjective language, it is more difficult, not impossible. We gather evidence, and the reasonable standard is one for a judge or jury to decide, judge in case of a town ordinance. And we try to do our best guess to figure out what the judge would agree with. So the subjective, more difficult, but the objective of a bright line time is very helpful. Because then as the enforcers who receive the noise complaints, when we go somewhere, we can say, it is out of compliance because of this clear rule. So that is very helpful for us. The other thing I want to point out in section 6, there's a strikeout that deals with subsequent penalties. But then, and I think what you were doing was a subsequent penalty within 6 months would have the enhanced penalty of $250. But the language doesn't carry through. It says for any second or subsequent violation within the 6-month period, and then it ends. So I think what it wants to say, or what the board wants it to say, and the town may want it to say, is all for any second or subsequent violation within a 6-month period, fine would be $250. So it looks like it's shortening the second or subsequent offense period from 12 months to 6 months, but it didn't include a fine for that. So that might be language we want to add before the final draft.
okay. Other comments? Yes.
Yes, hi, my name is Chris Waitchert. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Jackson Ski Touring Foundation. I'm also, well, I mentioned I'm a resident, but I appreciate the opportunity to comment on the changes and to the regulation of noise ordinance. The foundation is silent on, or neutral, we're silent on the proposed changes on the 10:30 or 10 o'clock question. However, we do have concerns about the vagueness of the current 2020 noise ordinance at section 2, unnecessary noise prohibited, and I'm happy to leave this off with the secretary, because we as a ski foundation, as a ski center, must groom and make snow after 10 p.m. for multiple reasons. We've tested our snow guns at the nearest residence, and noise levels for our machines are less than 60 decibels, which translates to a typical conversation, a dishwasher, or a clothes dryer, just as a reference. Because section 2, unnecessary noise prohibited has numerous undefined terms. We do request, the foundation does request that snow grooming and snowmaking be added to section 3, exempted noise, for clarity. Jackson has a long history with cross-country skiing, as we know. Snowmaking today is a required survival tool for the Jackson Ski Touring Foundation with climate change. For both safety as well as snowmaking conditions relative to winds, temperature, and relative humidity, it is typically essential for it to occur at nighttime. Nighttime in the winter is a time when most people are in their houses. Grooming in the evening is also essential to let the snow set after a groomer passes. And for safety, as mixing groomers on the steep, windy trail at the same time as skiers is a serious safety issue. We also, just a small item, but we also note that in section 6 penalties, there's an incomplete sentence relative to second or subsequent violations. So that should be made note of that. Thank you for your consideration for these comments.
Thank you. Yes, Mike.
Sure. Speaking on behalf of the 2 golf courses in town, so I'll talk about the other end of the time scale. So 6 a.m., the lawnmowers, are they defined as noise?
You know, again, I think it goes back to what our decibels, the 90 decibels, but, you know, again, I'm gonna say the same thing. We're not here to prohibit what businesses need to do. So if 6 a.m. is not the right thing for the town of Jackson, then I think that doesn't, we don't want mountains to have no snow. We don't want the groomers to not be able to be out there and cause safety issues. The mowers certainly have to groom the course before the first tee. tee off. So, you know, those are the things where, yeah, this is why we're here talking about it. 6 a.m. sounds good to me. I'm usually asleep in the morning. So, you know, it makes sense to me. But what about the other businesses and considerations? So, are we trying to fix something that's not broken? 10:30, we don't have anything in the morning hours, so it doesn't say anything. It's silent as to the morning hours right now. It just says until 10:30. So prohibiting the right to use equipment to do your business is not where we want to be. Unfortunately, for the folks that live adjacent to golf courses and mountains and ski touring, that is what the nature of living in a residential area that is adjacent to an area is. And I don't envy that for some people that really want to sleep and have that noise, but you do live concurrent to a space that has to do the business. So, yes, Eric?
Yep,
And then Penny?
Yeah, so you talk about the farming piece, right? There's specific caveats for agriculture use and plowing snow and those type of things. And I think that's very similar to what we're talking about with grooming snow and making snow, right? If you buy a house next to a farm, right, the noise ordinance is not going to apply if Dean wants to drive his tractor around and cut his grass, right? That's a legitimate exception. And I think the same thing happens if you buy, you know, next to a ski area. Or a golf course, right? You can't go golfing and complain that the grass being cut is loud, or the snow being groomed is loud. And that's the reality. And most of these farms, like I'm not aware of any new farms in Jackson that haven't been here for a very long time, and I'm not aware of any new ski areas that haven't been here for a very long time. And that's the purpose behind pre-existing use. So there's a pre-existing use and consideration for running a farm in Jackson, and I think there should be a pre-existing use and consideration for running a ski area, whether it's downhill or not.
Penny? Pen?
Hi, yeah, I'm thinking about what I was gonna say. Now I've left the barn.
Chief?
Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm back. Sorry. Is there a reason why you didn't mention decibels? I know the current with the alcohol permit or whatever it does mention decibels and all those limitations. Is there a reason why you didn't list those specifics, which are very measurable and easy to follow through on and less subjective in this? I don't see anywhere where the decibels are actually
I
mentioned.
don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
So, to be considered for sure. Chief?
Yeah, I just want to point something out with this original ordinance that was passed in 2020. There was some discussion during its vetting and then ultimately when it was approved about clarifying farming and or agricultural activity and machinery used. And I just want to clarify, because I know this point has been made, everything that goes on outside is not agriculture. Agriculture, the legal definition of agriculture is the science or art of cultivating soil, harvesting crops, and raising livestock, encompassing the tillage of soil, planting, and animal rearing through modern legal context, often used in the broader statutory definitions to include processing. So the question of whether something is an agricultural activity is, it really has to be associated with agriculture. It just can't be an outside thing. But I think in the context of Section 2, the controlling language that we lean on as far as enforcement and responding to complaints is really the language that says excessive, unnecessary, or unusually loud noise. Now, we lean on that because, you know, a golf course cuts the grass early in the morning. That's not an unusual noise. If he decides to cut the grass with, I don't know what, a giant crazy machine, you know, that makes 1,000 decibels, you know, the same as, you know, a grandfathered activity, the activity may be grandfathered, but the noise output of the activity, I don't believe would pass muster if it was claimed that any level of noise associated with the activity could be tolerable. So we really lean on excessive, unnecessary, or unusually loud when and if to the extent we get complaints. But as far as just clarifying farming and agricultural activities, those are really things associated with agriculture, like, farming, and, cutting hay and cutting wood and those kind of things.
Throw in logging in there because,
Yes.
Eric's done logging, many people come in and log in. A skidder will put a skidder and
That's
a
another-
feller bunch will put everything to shame.
Yeah, I think that, I actually think of something that's done in this town on a regular basis, a ski touring facility, a ski area, a golf course that was in violation of the noise ordinance in the past, and I certainly don't see that changing in the future. And so if there are ways to tighten up that language, and the same with the, special events that have gone on in town. It's hard for me to imagine a race or a ski touring event or a ski race or an end-of-year celebration that would be impacted. Those are day-to-day and operational, so tightening up that language, exempted noise, section 3A, adding snow moving, some sort of a language so that that's protected, just and exempt, just like snow clearance and snow removal is. I mean, these are simple and minimal changes that I think could be seen then as looking at a much more reasonable and clear noise ordinance than the one that was crafted in 2020.
Ken, thank you.
Just one thing about trying to get quantitative, and I just want to warn you, it's a very dangerous thing to do.
It is.
And the reasons I say that is because sound is really varies by the weather conditions that you have.
Yeah.
If you have an inversion, it will carry one way. Certain weather conditions, I can hear the horn from the Conway's railways. Other days, I can't hear it at all. So you can set decibel limits, et cetera, but having been engaged in some of these litigations in my environmental career, I can tell you the models get very messy really fast.
Right.
I think if you set something like 100 decibels, from the nearest source to the next house, that's probably workable. Once you get past that, good luck.
Yeah, thanks. It is nice because there are apps that you can use for, to measure decibels at certain things, but they're subjective to that point in time.
But what I'm saying is the environmental conditions.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
One night you'd be legal, the
Yeah.
next night you'd be illegal.
Yeah.
That's the challenge you're gonna run into.
Yeah.
Yep, just to the chief's point, I'm not an attorney nor is the chief, but he is categorically wrong. An expansion of volume or frequency is not an expansion. An increase in volume or frequency is not an expansion on historical use. And we just saw that ruling out of Superior Court as well. So if you make snow with a larger machine, that is not going to validate the historical use of it. Now, I would also say that modern equipment is generally quieter. Our snowcats are quieter than they were a while back. They're certainly more efficient. They're certainly put less CO2 in the air. Our diesel compressors use less energy. Our low energy snowmaking system, we can make 3 to 4 times the amount of snow with the same energy that Black Mountain made snow with just 24 months ago. So in general, I think everyone wants to be good neighbors, and technology is allowing us to bring the volumes down and have a superior product. But an expansion of the frequency or the volume in New Hampshire does not negate historical use.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything new to question or add? I think we've covered a lot of really good points. Again, I think we need to take back some of our comments and look at some of the language to make it more clear or maybe less vague. I don't know if decibels are a good thing to have in this, and I think that's something that we need to consider because, like Ken said, it can be very subjective to the time of day, the weather, etc. We need to clarify the missing sentence in the section 5A, and then I think that, in my opinion, and I'll listen to what your guys' opinions are as well, I don't know that we need to change the time. If 10:30 is working and 6 a.m. is not a reasonable time for other events in town, then adding those could be more prohibitive than we want. So thoughts on that?
10:30 is fine. Although Mark LaHood mentioned that a discretion if something goes over. Can we handle something like this, or is just
You
the
know,
way it is,
honestly,
it's 10:30?
as a one-off situation like that, I think it's going to depend on, I don't think Mark's gonna try to call me at 10:30 at night to see if he can get a select board exception. And I think that at the same time, if you make the decision because your party that is paying you a lot of money wants to have the band, you could be subject to a noise call from the police as a complaint, which they would have to respond to. So, gosh, I hope we don't have, I hope we have that conversation at some other time, but I don't think it's something that we have to clarify on here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Eric?
No, further explain.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought-
My name's Joan Kelly, I live on Sugar Hill Lane, and I can tell you that the inn that you were talking about, Bob, is, it's still very loud where I live. I don't know why the acoustics hit my particular neighborhood, but I can tell you on multiple days, multiple evenings, multiple nights, last year and the years before, you can still hear it enough to know the lyrics if you know the song. But so that's why I had a visceral reaction to 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So, it's out there, it's loud. I call them up and then I say, well, we're having a wedding. Yeah, that's why I'm calling. Or could I speak to the event planner? Oh, the event planner isn't here now.
Yeah.
And the tent flaps are supposedly down, but the service tent flap usually is open. Well, not usually. I've seen it open before. I should put it that way. So when I say 10 o'clock really is the latest you want to do it, I'm suffering from not being able to get to sleep at 10 o'clock or before 10 o'clock.
And again, I think that most of the wedding venues stop at 10 with the knowledge that by 10:30, they're going to start stopping at 10, put it that way, and then by 10:30 it should be down. But, I think that, like we've always said, if you have a complaint, the best thing is to log the complaint and call in the complaint to the police department.
I did one time last year.
Yeah.
And it kind of worked.
Yeah.
But they did reduce the noise from one section of the band. But the bass and the drums were still pounding the Jackson. It was like a jungle sound.
Andrew.
Anything else? All right, a rewrite for version number 1, and say that again.
Well, I think that all along we felt like, we wanted to put as much time into these ordinances as they needed, and that is still our commitment. And, whether it takes the better part of a year with the committee or input or whatever we do, I mean, there's no sense of urgency on this, in my opinion, because I'd rather, take more time and get it right.
Right. Agreed? Any other comments before we close it down? All right, thank you all again for being here. It is 5:52. I will adjourn the public hearing. See you all next, I'll see you guys all at the budget hearing, right?